So part of the ancient teaching was ritualize your life. Make the most mundane and pedestrian activities of your life something that's part of a much more profound system of things. And that's where, again, where the concept of scale and variance comes in. Let's go on here. Cycles of global change. The part that we're looking at is this part right here, the Quaternary, as I mentioned to you. We're in a period called the Holocene. Now, this is using the geological terminology, and of course, for my own studies, I believe the geologists have just come up with recognition of the same system that the ancients had, just given it different names. Okay, whether we call it the post-Diluvian world or the Holocene, or we call it the Pleistocene or the antediluvian world, it's the same thing. Geology now recognizes that at this boundary right here, something major happened. Something very profound happened to our planet. In fact, so profound that most people haven't even begun to appreciate yet how totally profound it really was. And hopefully before we leave tonight, you will take with you some insight into the nature of planetary change. Okay, so what I want you to learn is two terms, the Holocene and the Pleistocene. The Holocene is the last 10,000 years that we've been in. The Pleistocene is the roughly 2 million years that preceded that. What differentiates the Holocene from the Pleistocene that moved geologists to create a whole separate category for the last 10,000 year period that we're in? Well, about 2 million years ago, the planet went through a major shift. When we go back to the Pliocene, which is this period preceding the Pleistocene, the planet was a very warm place, much warmer than it is actually right now. And in that transition from Pliocene to Pleistocene, something happened, and it inaugurated a climatic seesaw that has taken us perhaps as many as 40 cycles of glacial, interglacial, back to interglacial cycles within that 2 million years. The last glacial cycle ended 10,000 years ago. Now, if we use the archaic terminology, we would simply say that or using the concept of the Great Year, we discovered that within the concept of the Great Year had 12 months, as does our annual year, and it also had 4 seasons. Each season symbolized by one of the so-called 4 beasts of the apocalypse. Well, we discovered that the belief system about the Great Year was that there was a winter, a great winter of the Great Year, and there was a summer of the Great Year. Well, the winter of the Great Year, to the archaic understanding, was to the modern geological understanding an ice age. It's that quite simple, and the correlation is that strong. So, with that, now we know the Holocene is the last 10,000 years. The Pleistocene was the last 2 million. We have been in a 10,000 year period of relatively stable climate. And I'm going to show you some climate graphs here as we go on. This was one way that our archaic traditions handed down the concept of the Great Year. What we see here is Jesus seated within the Vesica Piscis, which is the first proposition of Euclidean geometry, out of which the whole edifice of geometry emerges, this lozenge shape that he's sitting in. The thing I want to call your attention to is the fact that there is a cross behind his head, which is the universal symbol for the fourfold division of natural processes, and the 4 beasts of the apocalypse, the bull, the lion, the eagle, and the angel, which stand for the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac, which are Taurus the bull, Leo the lion, Aquarius is the angel, and the eagle is Scorpio. Scorpio, because if you go out and you learn your astronomy, if you go out and you watch Scorpio rising, you'll see Aquila the eagle rising just to its left with it. In fact, just to its south, you'll see Aquila the eagle rising. So Aquila became a substitute for Scorpio. But the idea is the same thing. There are these 4 periods within the Great Year. And that's what's being symbolized by these 4 creatures right here. This is referred to as the Portal of Judgment, Chartres Cathedral, symbolizing the Great Year of the world in the 4 ages. We could talk a lot more about what's going on here, but we need to move right on. There are references both in the Old and the New Testament. Ezekiel, the Old Testament prophet, said that also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures. They 4 had the face of a man and the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side and the face of an eagle. And they 4 had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. I believe this refers actually to the nature of cyclic time, is that cyclic time can be modeled as a wheel within a wheel. If we begin to think about each of these, the diurnal cycle, the annual cycle, the precessional cycle, each one of these is a wheel that's contained within a greater wheel. And it's the synchronization of these wheels that can lead us into an intimate understanding of the kinds of changes that are reflected and translated down here to us living on the surface of this planet. From the New Testament, the Revelation, the book Apocalypsis, which is the Greek spelling of the Revelation of St. John, originally written in Greek, it says, "In the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts. And the first beast was like a lion, the second a calf, the third beast as a man, and the fourth beast was like a flying eagle." So here, both in the Old and New Testament prophecies, we find reference to this cycle of the great year and the 4 seasons, symbolized by the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. Now, if the full cycle is 25,920 years, if you remember that number, then you're going to know that 1/4 of that cycle, if you quick do the math in your head, everybody, got it? 6,480 years. 6,480 years. Now that is one of the key numbers that we want to remember, because that's one of the numbers that we can use to measure where we might be at any given time within the system, within the cycles. The Wheel of Fortune, the 10th trump of the Tarot. I don't know if any of you have studied the Tarot or are familiar with it. Basically, my interpretation of the Tarot is it's the cosmological history of the world in symbolism. It's only secondarily that's used as a fortune-telling device, because the ancient masters knew that it was so important to preserve the archaic wisdom that any venue that could be exploited in the preservation and transmission of that knowledge was acceptable. And so they relied upon the vices and so forth of people all through time to help them preserve this knowledge. And so all kinds of different, in fact, a whole lecture I do is on the hidden symbolism in various sports, such as golf and baseball and so forth, and how it's remarkable reflection of the archaic patterns of knowledge. But on here you'll notice that you've got the bull, the lion, the eagle, and the man. And there's the same concept again, the idea of these 4 creatures, and the wheel itself is turning. And there's lots of interesting symbolism going on there. We see the Sphinx, we see the serpent, and that would be the serpent from the Garden of Eden. And we see Typhon, who was the great dragon who was slain by Zeus in a cosmic war. And here we see an Aztec sun calendar, which is also a version of the great year and the 4 ages, recapitulating the same symbolism. Here we see an Incan symbol for the 4 ages of the world and the 4 sacred directions. And here we see a model of the simplified model of the great year with the 4 ages and their various dates. You can see that right here we've got, this would be the present date right here, and what we're looking at here is the motion of the vernal equinox. I'm going to show you a slide that'll help clarify that in a second. But again, you'll notice there's this 4-fold propeller there that marks the 4 fixed signs: the bull, the lion, the scorpion, and Aquarius, the water bearer. And if we go back to the Incan symbol, we see that same propeller right there. Okay, this is the motion we're talking about right here. That's the full cycle. And here's a graphic that'll help to clarify that. Let's see if it'll work here. Here we go. Okay, I want you to look what's going on here. We've got the vernal equinox here, and we have the autumnal equinox there. We have the green line here, which is the celestial equator, and we have the yellow line, which is the plane of the ecliptic. Now, these are 2 great reference planes that ancient peoples were intimately aware of. And part of what they would set out with their various temple complexes and so forth